Hearing that, I will call this meeting to order. Good morning, everyone, and I will acknowledge that we're meeting by Microsoft Teams. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are meeting virtually again this month. The meeting is being live streamed on the Port's YouTube channel. If you have a question or comment, please use the raise hand function to ensure that everyone has time to speak. I'll call on folks. That said, I'll call for a motion and second to grant a leave of absence to Commissioner Nemi, who is out of town.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We'll have a roll call vote. Elise, if you could help us with that.
Commissioners Alexander,
Present.
Kupel-Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
Sumpet,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move on to approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting of October 13th, 2021. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask Elise to lead us through the roll call vote.
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Kupel-Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
Sumpet,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you. Curtis, would you provide the executive director's report, please?
Happy to. Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Really appreciate seeing everyone here this morning. I do want to also welcome our group of new Port employees who are watching. We just got to spend a half hour with them this morning. Some great and diverse backgrounds, really rich conversation. I got to join the group last week. I'm just really excited to have them with us. And we talked this morning about how exciting it is to be in a place that's both welcoming and in a time of change and transition. And so just want to shout out to everyone joining us from the new employee cohort. I'd also like to acknowledge the Port's monthly safety champions who I believe will be here on the screen. There we go. Again, a group of Port employees who are really doing above and beyond. They're reaching to help make the Port a safer place to be and watching out for themselves and each other, their fellow employees, and making the Port just a better place. So thank you to these 4 employees, our safety champions for the month. And next, I'm going to ask Ellen Ridgway to join us, who is here today on behalf of Stan Waters, who's out for this month's safety message. Ellen, are you ready to go with the safety message?
I am. Thank you, Curtis. And good morning, commissioners. My message today will report on the Port's Safety Perception Survey participation results, and also give a travel safety reminder for the upcoming holidays. You may remember Stan describing last month that Port employees had the opportunity to share their thoughts on our safety culture maturity through the Safety Perception Survey that was open for 2 weeks in October. And I'm happy to report that our employee participation level was 82%. And that result is nearly 30 points higher than our previous survey in 2018. So going forward, select employees will be interviewed this month by our consultant, and the Safety Perception Survey report to Port leadership will occur in January. And I also wanted to heighten awareness to driving safety in advance of one of the busiest over-the-road travel seasons, Thanksgiving. Driving is the most dangerous activity many of us perform. Bad weather, shorter periods of daylight, and distracted drivers add to the danger, particularly in this season. Here are some driving safety tips. Make sure your car is in good condition for a road trip. Pack an emergency preparedness kit and supplies in the trunk. Plan ahead, check the weather along your route, use Trip Check, and expect delays. Share your travel plans with others. Be well rested and alert to combat drowsy driving. Buckle up, slow down, and don't drive impaired. Follow the rules of the road. Mind speed, space, and changing conditions. Use caution in work zones and provide space to roadside activities. Make frequent stops, and during long trips, rotate drivers. Give your full attention to the road by avoiding distractions. And if you have vehicle trouble, pull off the road as far as possible and have high visibility clothing for roadside inspections or repairs. Do your part to have safe road trips over this holiday season. Curtis, that is my safety message for the month. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks, Ellen. You know, Angela and I had the kids up at Rhododendron this weekend, and with the change of the clocks and the darkness of the season and a little water on the roads is just such a hazardous time to be out there. So just everyone, please be very, very careful. A few comments this morning. First, port employee vaccine mandate. I mentioned last month where we announced a decision to require vaccinations for all port employees. I feel very strongly that we have an obligation to keep our organization and our community safe. And we also fall under the guidelines for the federal executive order for all federal contractors. The only group excluded from any mandate at this time are port police officers, as state law prohibits us from mandating vaccines for those employees. They will, however, be subject to the federal mandate in the future. I know this has been a rough period. We're going to get through this. I just hope and encourage everyone to get out there and get vaccinated if you haven't already. Exciting news this last week, the infrastructure bill passed in Congress, and the president's signing it. The port really welcomes the congressional passage of the act. It's going to provide significant investment in infrastructure, including a fair amount of new money into Oregon. We're just really excited about it, both for airports and for ground transportation, new opportunities for the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Army Corps to provide grants for funding other priority projects at the port. Just great news. And we're very grateful for the participation of our own congressional delegation in helping to make that happen. You may have read in the paper or whatever news source you use, the international travel restrictions have mostly been lifted on Monday. Travel restrictions for fully vaccinated foreign nationals changed, and so travelers may now enter the United States with proof of World Health Organization approved vaccination and a negative COVID test. It's great news for the airport. We anticipate the return of our transoceanic flights this spring, as we've talked about. Very exciting to get back into direct travel, both into Europe and to Asia. Delta already tells us that they're seeing a 450% increase in bookings to the United States. So I'm really hopeful about that and seeing a turn in our gradual stepping out of the pandemic and economic dislocation we've seen in the region. Some fun stuff going on inside the airport. First, the Hollywood Theater opened a week ago back in Concourse C. It's been closed for about a year and a half, and I know a lot of our traveling passengers are really excited to get back in there and see those shorts connected to Portland directors and producers and Oregon sights and sounds. So really excited about that. Due to changes in PDX Next, Hollywood changed locations, and so now they're still on Concourse C, but now further down near gate C13. The micro cinema features an upgraded AV system as well with 4K projection. It's pretty great. So when you get a chance, check it out. And finally, the rental car center and parking garage opened today. I think many of you know a few of our executive team members are missing because they're down there right now opening the new rental car center and parking garage. Congratulations to all our partners and port employees who made this happen in the middle of a pandemic. They really worked tirelessly and safely to get the work done. So now travelers are going to be able to get in and out of PDX faster. with all of the rental cars on site and no more shuttles. PDX is currently serving 11 rental car partners, and now they're all within walking distance of the airport. The bright facility down there is really great. It reflects the Pacific Northwest with big open spaces, warm wood panels, and natural lighting, and 3 new art installations that are really lovely, celebrating the region's diversity. The journey for visitors is actually easier through a tunnel with no weather exposure, so it is really going to be a great attribute for our traveling public. We also opened the new parking garage with over 2,000 parking spots, which should make things easier as holiday travel starts again, and we'll see our passenger numbers increase here over the course of the next several weeks and month. The parking garage and rental car center invested in a new technology along the way, which I'm pretty excited about. It's called Carbon Cure, that reduces carbon emissions at PDX by trapping carbon dioxide in concrete. PDX is the first in the region to utilize this low carbon concrete technology. It's pretty neat, and I suspect something we'll see more of in the future. So with that, Madam President, lots of exciting news. Appreciate the Commissioner's time this morning, and I'll close my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. Reminded of the conversation some of us just got to have with the new employees about things we miss. I regret that we can't be there for the opening of these new facilities. We've certainly been looking forward to them, and I know it was important to bring all of the rental cars, to a close proximity of the terminal. We heard that from the rental car companies, and I know it's important to travelers as well. So exciting. Movement forward on big plans at the airport. Any questions or comments on the Executive Director's report? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for motion and second to accept the Executive Director's report this month.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, thank you. Elise, would you lead us through the roll call vote, please?
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Kupo-Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
Stumpett,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you. We did not receive any public comment this month, so we'll move on to our first consent item. And I'll ask if any commissioner wants a presentation on the consent item, the title of which is Public Improvement Contract, Maintenance Building 7111 Roof Replacement, Portland International Airport. Okay, seeing none, I'll call for a motion and second to approve the consent item.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll turn it over to Elise for the roll call vote, please.
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Kupo-Comas,
Aye.
Lamb,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
Stumpett,
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Thank you. I'll call on Keith Levitt to introduce our first agenda item. Keith.
Great. Thank you, Madam President and members of the Commission. I think you all have heard my excitement about this particular agenda item. It's long in the making. We've been working hard on the sale of Lot 10 at Gresham Vista Business Park. I think it's worth reflecting a bit on our history in East Multnomah County. I'm going to do that just very quickly, but if I were to really trace for you the trajectory of the last 20 years of industrial development and investment by the Port of Portland, it's been, I would go no further than East Multnomah County. And whether it's the Troutdale Reynolds Industrial Park that's known as TRIP, the largest Superfund redevelopment project ever done in the state, or whether it's Gresham Vista Business Park, which we're going to talk about here today. We are well into $140 million of investment over that period of time in both of these areas. And, why were we on that trajectory? Well, we were aligned with the community. And I'm so excited with this particular project because I think historically we would have brought you a really interesting, fun project, which it is all of that. But this one really represents our evolution into shared prosperity work associated with our real estate work and kind of doubling down on the partnerships that we have in the communities. So we're honored today to be joined by Scott Lawrence, who is the founder of Breakside. He's going to describe the company. Shannon Stady, who runs economic development for the city of Gresham. Emily Bauer, who is head of the redevelopment commission with the city, going to talk about the connection to Rockwood. I will also say that Rockwood represents for me, and I think a lot of our team, what the future of our work is going to look a lot more like, where you're truly engaging the community that you are trying to positively affect and building that into your development and your investing. And it's truly an exciting story, what is happening in Rockwood. We also have the great benefit of a great mayor at the city of Gresham with Travis Stovall. My team got to meet with the mayor, with his team during the summer on this site. And the uniqueness of this site, some of you have heard about. It is not your garden variety industrial parcel with a big rectangle where you can put rectangular buildings. It has steep topography. It's got beautiful access to natural resources, beautiful views, and this is just a unique opportunity to activate this site in a way that is transformative in the community. So and then finally, last but not least, Doug Smith is here to bring this proposal and this recommendation forward. But with that, I'm going to ask Scott to go ahead and introduce himself and introduce the company.
Good deal. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, commissioners, for your time. This is something I'm obviously very interested in and excited about. And I'll start just tell you a little bit about Breakside and what we're planning on doing for the site. And if you have any questions, let me know. I opened Breakside in 2010 in Northeast Portland on Deacom Street, a neighborhood that didn't have a brew pub, a lot of young families. I mean, frankly, for Portland too, a real diverse area, and I loved it. I sold everything I had. I sold my car, my 401k, I mean, every single penny, and rode my bike to work and got open by the skin of my teeth, and it took off. It just kind of worked well. And as we've grown and expanded into a production facility in Milwaukee and some other tap rooms around town, a few years ago, we actually had the opportunity to sell to a couple different big breweries and private equity firms, but we thought it was best. The best opportunity frankly, for me personally and our team was to do an ESOP. So we gave 30% of the company at that time to our staff. So now our company is one of the only employee-owned breweries in the country, and plan on doing more than 30% eventually. But as part of our overall trajectory, the space we're in Milwaukee, we're in 3 different warehouses. We rent them all. It's just not a very efficient setup. And the idea to build our own production facility and make it a world-class destination was something that we've sought out. And frankly, I've been looking all over the Portland metro area for the last 4 or 5 years, just kind of feeling things out. And we found this site. It was magical to me, frankly. It looks like you're out in wine country. You're driving up this, kind of steep embankment, old growth trees, water reservoir. It's this picturesque setting in the middle of a commercial and industrial hub, frankly. And so when I saw it, I knew it was a exciting opportunity. And Doug and I were talking before COVID, before the pandemic, and it looked like we were getting close on some stuff. Then that happened, and we had to take a couple steps back. But just excited to be here again and to see this finally get kicked off. So and that's kind of where we stand. I mean, I envision we're going to put about a 60,000 square foot production facility where we make all of our beer and do some pretty innovative stuff, I think, around a tasting room and this playground experience. You know, and I say playground, but I mean, you know, bocce ball courts and this park-like setting with trails and hammock fields and playground for kids. Just this area where I think that will, you know, enhance the community and give us a place where we can work efficiently. So kind of for me, I see it as a win on both sides. That's really what I have, Doug, unless you want me to say anything else, or Curtis want me to say anything else. Let me know if you guys have any questions. And again, thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Scott. I think next is Emily Bauer Shannon Stady, but it does look like Commissioner Alexander does have a question.
Yeah, I actually, Scott, I was just taken by your describing your new home as looking like wine country. To have a brewery say that is, so, you know, I know there's hope for world peace now. But anyway, we appreciate your insights and comments, and this is very exciting stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the feedback.
Commissioner Sumpet?
Yes, it's great to see this proposal, especially for an organization that is employer-owned, creating kind of shared prosperity and keeping the capital and the wealth within the region and the state. So wonderful to see this. And on a lighter note, do we as commissioners and port employees get a special discount at this new facility?
I will happily send out gift packs if you guys are thirsty, and I'm definitely excited to share some beers together once we get this thing kicked off.
You know, you're making the hairs on Dan's neck stand up. Legal counsel here, but go ahead.
Commissioner O'Halloran?
Hey, I just wanted to say thank you, and I love the vision and wish for success. I'm nearby your operation in St. John's and frequent it probably more than I should, but it's a great operation and good to have you the partnership.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Lamb?
Scott, I just want to say congratulations and thank you for expanding your company, keep it local, and creating more jobs. And I just want to say thank you so much for investing in our local talent, and best of luck to you.
Thanks. It's you know, it feels surreal sometimes with where we started to what we're looking at with this project, and you know, kind of what we can do with our staff and the community. It's really exciting.
Thank you, Commissioners. Doug, back to you.
Great. I think our next speaker is Shannon Stady with the City of Gresham. So Shannon, please take it away.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks, Keith. Scott, you're a hard act to follow, but I'm going to do my best. Good morning, commissioners, members, and staff. Really want to thank you very much for the opportunity to share the city's support for this really exciting project. The city's partnership with the port is longstanding and active. As a community, we genuinely appreciate and value the role the port has played, first in purchasing Gresham Vista back in 2011, and now more broadly in working collaboratively to achieve community-wide goals and outcomes. For the City of Gresham, economic development encompasses a very broad work plan aimed to nurture and grow a base of jobs across all pay and skill levels, with the ultimate intent to create opportunities for all residents now and into the future. This project is especially exciting for the city as it sits at the gateway to our community from the north and the west. It takes advantage, as you've heard, of a beautiful setting to create an attractive destination as well as provide family wage jobs and opportunities for Gresham and East County residents. The collective team at the city encourages you to approve the sale of Gresham Vista Lot 10 to Breakside Brewery, and we very much look forward to all that it will bring to our community. I would love to introduce you to my colleague, Emily Bauer, who will share a little bit more about the Downtown Rockwood project that will benefit from the collaboration between the Breakside team, the Port team, and the city team. Thank you, Doug. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shannon, so much for the introduction. Thank you, commissioners. It is a great invitation to be able to speak on behalf of the Downtown Rockwood project, and we are so pleased that the Port reached out to connect this Breakside opportunity with such an important project in our community. It is a privilege to speak and honor the many voices that have shaped this development project. The Downtown Rockwood project began in 2015, and it is designed as a comprehensive outcome to address the gaps where they exist for community members. The project team, guided by the principle of equity, knows that the vision couldn't be realized without an intentional focus on those who need assistance the most. The project strategies were identified to address the unique barriers to entry experienced by residents and small business owners, to create living wage jobs for youth and adults, to make healthy food accessible, and to engage the community in a way that gives them a voice about changes in their neighborhood and provides a platform for participation to create a more inclusive Rockwood. Every partner use program and outcome must support a path towards the community vision of economic empowerment. The project site became the new headquarters for the Oregon Tradeswomen LLC in January of 2020, where they launched in-person and virtual training focused on the construction trades. WorkSource Oregon, Mount Hood Small Business Center, and Wallace Medical Concern are the anchor tenants of the Innovation Center, with a ground floor restaurant and a bilingual daycare facility that supports staff and clients attending on-site training. The Market Hall is approximately 21,000 square feet with 14,000 square feet of flexible office space. And the Market Hall will support the new flagship location for Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center and Rosemary Anderson High School's culinary training and food manufacturing program. There's an on-site commercial kitchen that's rented by the hour, micro restaurants, grocery, and micro retail. It is designed to offer multiple entry points for food industry retailers, mature and emerging. With extensive outreach, the Equity Tenant Selection Committee, and key partnerships with Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon, 90% of the micro restaurants are leased to Black, Indigenous, and people of color entrepreneurs. The Market Hall continues to actively recruit for ethnic international grocers and fresh produce market tenants. The final phase is the mixed income, mixed use building, which will start construction in the new year. The $70 million project will generate approximately 400 jobs, 40 plus minority owned, women owned, emerging small businesses, 108 units of mixed income housing, and approximately 500 students annually will have increased access to skill building and job training. And 23,000 residents will have better access to relevant resources and new culturally diverse, fresh, and prepared food options. We're excited for the opportunity to collaborate with Breakside and the Port of Portland to continue prosperity building and wealth creation through entrepreneurship, business mentorship, and workforce training with the local West Gresham residents and business community. Thank you again for the opportunity to talk about the project. At this point, I'll turn it over to Doug Smith with the Ports and Trade Equitable Development Division. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. Next slide, please. I hope commissioners, you'll have an opportunity to go visit the Rockwood development. It really is quite extraordinary. My name is Doug Smith. I'm with the Trade and Equitable Development Division here at the Port. I'm pleased to have this chance to highlight how this project reflects the priorities introduced by our division chief, Keith Levitt, at the outset this morning. Not only is Breakside a local entrepreneurial success story that happens to also produce award-winning beers, but they have a strong track record of supporting their employees and community. Early on in our discussions about this project, they asked for an introduction to Mount Hood Community College, at first to talk about an apprenticeship program for the brewing industry, but that evolved into a conversation about a potential scholarship to help Gresham and East County residents pursue an education focused on their interest in food and the beverage sector. We also sought out guidance from our partners at the city, and there was immediate recognition that the Rockwood project Emily described made perfect sense. Breakside's leadership saw an opportunity to create a continuum of skills development, beginning with the Rosemary Anderson Youth Career Pathways program, through which young people could develop skills and then earn employment opportunities, for example, at the Rockwood Market Hall, or even up at Breakside at Gresham Vista. Then they might further their education at Mount Hood Community College, positioning themselves to be the next cohort of entrepreneurs starting their own food courts, brick and mortar restaurants, or even craft breweries. Additionally, the project is the first outside of PDX to establish a small business participation rate during design and construction that is embedded in the purchase and sale agreement. Next slide, please. Allow me to orient you to this site and to Gresham Vista Business Park. The port purchased, as Keith said, more than 200 acres in 2011 to assist the city of Gresham with its economic development vision surrounding the facility at the center, now owned by ON Semiconductor. Since then, the business park has developed as a manufacturing and logistics hub over the years, with a number of successful new businesses added to the city. Lots 10 and 11 in the northwest corner of the park are distinct from the other sites in that they slope down from an upper plateau. Next slide, please. Here you can see the challenging topography of Lot 10. Much of the site is steeply sloped, wooded, and there is a small man-made pond shown at the bottom left of the picture. The only real developable area is at the top of the hill, where two older agricultural storage sheds exist. These will be removed by the buyer, and their plan is to construct their industrial brewery there. Next slide. This slide's a bit busy, but you can see the area at the lower right is where the future brewery will be constructed. This area represents what was agreed to be the developable area of the property. As you can see, much of the wooded areas and the pond will remain undeveloped, but for some of the trail systems and amenities described earlier by Scott. It's truly a beautiful site, and the opportunity to have it developed as proposed by Breakside for the community is unique. Next slide. So here are the business terms for your review and approval. The total site is 30.98 acres, of which less than 13 are considered developable. The negotiated price is $1,725,383, of which $250,000 is allocated to the community benefits described earlier. The net revenue to the port would be $1,475,383. At this time, are there further questions that we may answer regarding the business terms or the project itself?
Commissioner Alexander?
Yes. Can you give me any sense of the who is responsible for the care and feeding of the non-developable land on the site? Just what are the plans or sort of intentions around that, and who would like to be partnering with?
So the property, thank you, Commissioner Alexander. The property would be sold in its entirety to Breakside. And so the ongoing maintenance of the site and preservation of the natural areas would be part of Scott's vision going forward.
Okay. I'm sorry, would this be done sort of under the auspices of any particular governmental entity, whether it's Metro or, I mean, just trying to get a sense. When I see the term natural and protected areas, I know that there are high expectations here.
So there, if we could go back maybe one slide, I think to the So I'm not sure if maybe one more slide forward, so to the map area. So Commissioner Alexander, the area, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but the pond at the upper portion of this map, as well as the wooded areas to the east here, are under a restrictive covenant with the Oregon Division of State Lands. So there are limitations to the type of development that could take place there, and are for the most part would be kept in their natural state.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Thanks, Doug, for the presentation. I don't have a question. I wanted to sort of echo what other commissioners said at the beginning of this presentation about how exciting this project is. I remember touring this area back when I first joined the commission, and this lot in particular was spoken of as something that would be a challenge for the commission to figure out how to, develop it or sell it to someone who was interested in it, given the slope and the natural amenities of it. And so I appreciate that actually a solution to that was found, not only that takes into account the natural amenities of the site and maintains them, but also that really takes into account a lot of the structural and social issues that have been that have impacted this community, both in terms of jobs, ownership, capital, training, and etc. So really exciting, and I commend the commission and Breakside and the city of Gresham for finding a solution that hits so many boxes that I know we've been concerned about here. So thank you for that. I'll turn it to Commissioner McDonald.
Thank you, Madam President. And I'd like to echo first all my all the positivity that's been expressed about the exciting opportunity ahead here. I am wondering, since I think we all know, given the current economic environment, there's a lot of prosperity and a lot of opportunity amidst a fairly challenging fiscal situation. As you look forward, what do you most think you need to pay attention to in terms of the economy? And specifically, I'm asking about what do you see as the downside risk and potential mitigations that you can take?
I'm sorry, is that directed to the port or to Scott as owner of the future project?
I think it would be most properly directed to Scott as the future owner of the project. I assume we're going to get, we'll get to that phase.
Yeah, do you want to know like what kind of where this is a big endeavor and how I'm balancing the risk? Is that kind of the question? Yeah. Well, yeah, it is a risk. I mean, for sure. Like right now we rent, and there's no, it's not super scary. Even my wife was asking me last night, she's like, how are we doing this? In full disclosure, but right now we rent 3 different warehouses. So, we're paying 3 different owners that have different, that have different, responsibilities and goals. Yeah. So we're going to basically consolidate all that into one place that we own and pay ourselves rent, so to speak. So, there's a big risk. It's the building right now is I'm sure you're all aware of, is very expensive, like as everything is. Consumer price index went up 6.2%. They just announced this morning, and so it's going to be costly. But long term, I think it'll make us much more efficient as a company, as a brewery, because we'll be able to lay everything out how it should be for a brewery of our size. And I think that helps mitigate the risk, and we're just moving basically our rent from one pool to another. I feel comfortable with it. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for that answer. And is there any way that you can foresee the port needing to help, or how can we help?
Oh, I don't I don't. I mean, I would love help if you guys are doing. I don't have any idea what those options would be, but I mean, I think we have a path to where this is going to work out great. And some of the things we want to do with the the park settings. I do envision that kind of that protected area with a couple trails through it and areas where people can throw it on a blanket and hang out and kids can play. And that stuff isn't too costly, and so I think that'll be easy enough for us to handle. And really, it's just figuring out how we can fund the construction of the roads and the buildings and everything like that. But I think we have a good plan for it, so I'm pretty comfortable with where we're standing. If you want to come out and buy cool beers on occasion, I would love it. Thanks for your question and for your attention.
I think you can, based on the positive response, I think some of us will definitely be patrons.
Thanks.
Commissioner, any other questions or comments before I call for a motion? Commissioner O'Halloran.
Just to clarify, we're proposing a sale of the property, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And did we consider a long-term lease?
We did look at that as an option, and again, given the topography and the challenges associated with the site, it made more sense for the sale.
Yeah, if I'm Scott, I definitely prefer the sale. I'm just saying long-term for us. I was just thinking the revenue model, but I assume you've thought it through. But anyway, thank you.
Yes.
Maybe I'll just add a comment on that. I think that is a good, it is top of mind about our future. We do want to hold on to property more. Gresham, Vista, and Trip were both invested significantly a lot of capital early from the port. So the business model was to get the capital back because our general fund cash flow needed it. But I think going forward, as we look at our real estate assets, we would prefer to have that ongoing revenue stream.
Keith, I'm sorry, just a quick question in lieu of just alternative strategies. Do we ever come out of one of these deals with a minor equity interest as opposed to rental, or are we precluded from that? Or
it's
smiling, so obviously it's occurred.
I'm smiling because we're making our general counsel uncomfortable again, which is always fun. We're going to get all these gifts and we're going to take an equity stake in these private companies. It's great. No, I actually, it's an area in contracting with our lessees where we have opportunities to take more risk with them. And we have done some of that where we've taken, for instance, lease revenue that the tenants are, as they lease up a building, the port begins to get some of that as rent coming back, and you're taking lease up risk, with the tenant. But I think again, as we go forward, we will be looking at more of these types of unique, creative financing mechanisms to generate revenue for our work, but also, frankly, to take more risk with highly strategic developments that we want to kind of help them participate in that risk.
Well, I think this is the perfect storm in a lot of ways because you have a mission-driven developer and acquirer, and so many times in the marketplace, it's largely driven by the numbers as opposed to the outcome. So I'm just curious as to what kind of tools are in our belt, but I applaud the strategy.
And as Antoinette Chandler is deeply involved right now, we're both got our heads deep into the business model questions that you asked. And kind of as we go forward and really push our equitable development work forward, I think we'll be doing a lot more creative financial relationships with users.
Is there any long-term environmental? Sorry, is there any long-term environmental risk or other liability from the sale of the property?
None expected.
Thank you.
I was just going to chime in, Commissioner Alexander, that there's a Oregon constitutional prohibition on us owning an ownership, an equity stake in a private company. And so Keith and his team have come up with some creative ways to get a similar outcome without taking the risk of being associated with an entity through an equity stake.
But Dan, there's no prohibition on the port continuing to own the property and to lease it to private ventures.
Correct.
Thank you.
And I think the only thing that I would add here is just to follow up what Keith said, it really is about the optimization around financial sustainability and looking at it from a portfolio perspective as we go forward with different opportunities for investments that really balance out what we're trying to achieve in terms of shared prosperity, but also financial sustainability for the port. So you will see Commissioner O'Halloran and just all the commissioners, how we will be very balanced in our approach in doing that analysis of lease versus sale and what makes most sense for the port. So
yep. Clearly, if I'm Breakside, if I'm Scott, I want the sale and not the lease, and I just want to make sure we're making the best move for the port, and I rely on your assessment and consideration to do that, and I support your recommendation.
Thank you for the discussion, commissioners. I will say, Keith, I appreciate that the equitable development piece seems to be front and center here, and I again appreciate the focus. I think this will be a hard act to follow, so thanks for the work. Do I have a motion and second to approve the executive director's recommendation on the sale of this property?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Elise, would you lead us through the roll call vote, please?
Commissioners Alexander,
Aye.
Gupel-Kumutz,
Aye.
Sam,
Aye.
Levy,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
O'Halloran,
Aye.
Stumpett,
Aye.
and Strader.
Aye.
Thank you very much. We will move on to discussion about our audit. Antoinette.
great. Thank you, Madam President. And again, good morning, commissioners. As you all know, each year we're the port's required under our state statute, our bond ordinance, and just general federal guidance around our grants and our public facility charges, our PFCs, to have audits performed on our books and records. And so we're really here today to present the results of our fiscal year 21 audit. And I have the pleasure of being joined here by Bob Burkett, who is our controller, and also Ashley Austin, who is our engagement partner with Moss Adams, as well as Rachel Tarver, who was the senior manager for this port audit. And so Bob is going to walk us through a review of the fiscal year 2021 results. And then, as customary, Moss Adams will present their audit results and the required communications. And again, just like I did last year, really just want to give a big shout out to Bob, his team, as well as Moss Adams, again, for performing what we probably thought we would not be virtual for this long, but just operating in this remote environment and doing it with grace and with ease to get through this external audit. So I just want to send my gratitude and appreciation for your professionalism and your expertise in all that you bring and have continued to bring to our audit process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bob.
Great. Thank you, Antoinette. And good morning. And yes, brewing beer is a tough act to follow, but we'll do our best to make that natural transition to financial reporting. So we're here today to present to you the port's annual audit reports, give you a brief overview of our fiscal 2021 results, and for our auditors, Moss Adams, to present to you their reports and required communications for the audits that they performed. So you should have in advance received electronic copies of 3 different reports. The reports were the Port's audited financial statements, which is the report on our financial performance for fiscal year ending June 30, 2021. You should have received the Port's report on federal awards regarding federal funding compliance, and that's a report that's required for entities like the Port that receive significant federal funding. And then last, you should have the Port's passenger facility charge report. It's required by the Federal Aviation Administration for airports who impose a PFC like PDX does. So each of the reports serves a different purpose, but they all include the Port's basic financial statements summarizing the results of our fiscal year and our financial position as of June 30, 2021. And so I'll just take a few minutes to briefly review some of the information in each of the audit reports, and then I'll hand the presentation over to Moss Adams. Next, please. So we'll start with some income statement data for PDX and comparing our revenues and expenses for the fiscal years ending June 30, 2020 and 2021. If you start and focus on the bottom line, you can see it was a tough year for PDX, given the first full year of the coronavirus pandemic impacts in fiscal 2021. So jump up to that first line, operating revenues. You can see that our operating revenues decreased by nearly $19 million compared to fiscal 20 due to the impacts of the pandemic really on all of our passenger dependent revenue streams. So as a result of COVID, we ended the year with passenger counts down nearly 50% versus the prior year. We had 14.6 million passengers in fiscal 20 and only 7.5 million in fiscal 21. That compares to about nearly 20 million in fiscal 19 pre-pandemic. So it's a pretty drastic drop, as you're all aware of already. On the next line, operating expenses excluding depreciation, you'll see those are down slightly, coming in about $3.5 million lower during fiscal 21. It's primarily due to the impact of cost cutting during the pandemic. That third line, operating income before depreciation, it's the math. It's operating revenues less operating expenses. And then that fourth line, depreciation expense. You can see our depreciation expense is up nearly $10 million in fiscal 21. As more assets have come online during our capital expansion at PDX, we see this number increase. So since much of Terminal Core is still in progress, we'll see those projects coming online in the next few years, and we'll continue to see this depreciation expense number increase. Second to last line, non-operating income. You'll see that's down over $7 million in fiscal 21, in spite of the fact that we had an increase in federal CARES and CARISA Act relief funding that is reflected on this line. The overall decrease is really driven by lower passenger facility charge revenues, lower customer facility charge revenues, lower interest revenue, and higher interest expense as our latest bond issue has come online. So all of that combined together leads to the bottom line, and that bottom line is a small net loss for PDX of $4.7 million in fiscal 21. It really indicates that without federal stimulus funding, there would have been a very significant loss at PDX, $65 to $70 million. So we were definitely helped out by that federal stimulus. Next. So here we add some balance sheet information, year-end balances for assets, liabilities, and net position. Net position is just the mathematical difference between assets and liabilities, often referred to as equity or shareholders' equity in the private sector. But you can see that both assets and liabilities increased during the year. It's driven largely by increases in capital assets due to construction, and then increases in the related debt that funded that construction. But in total, our assets did increase slightly more than the liabilities. So we had a small increase in PDX net position of about $1.8 million. Next, please. And then last, we add, there we go. We add unrestricted cash and investment information. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties on my end. There we go. So we have this unrestricted cash and investment information now. And given the challenges we're facing in this environment, liquidity is more important than ever. So you can see that our unrestricted cash and investments, which are available for any lawful airport purpose, increased by $62 million in fiscal 21. Again, this indirectly tells us that the effects of the impacts of the pandemic would have been a significant liquidity decrease for the airport without CARES and CARES Act funding. So for more discussion on fiscal 2021 financial performance, I'd point you to the management's discussion and analysis section, which starts on about page 3 of the audit reports. It's about 6 pages of tables and discussion that really explain a lot more of the details behind fiscal 21 and the changes year over year from fiscal 20. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we'll move on to some high-level income statement data for the general fund. You'll notice that the general fund is referred to as marine and other in the audit reports that we've given you. Same thing regardless of the title. So in fiscal 21, our operating revenues increased versus fiscal 20. That's primarily due to increased container activity out at Terminal 6, as well as increased dockage revenues in the same period. Our operating expenses, excluding depreciation, at the same time went down from $78.8 million to $70.7 million. And that's really due more to accounting adjustments for the lower Portland Harbor environmental expense accruals that we booked in fiscal 21. But that is partially offset by the higher longshore labor expenses that you would anticipate would be associated with higher T6 container activity. Down to depreciation expense, it's pretty flat year over year. That's primarily just the result of regular asset depreciation, with new assets coming online about the same rate as the old assets are retired. And down to non-operating income. Our non-operating income decreased by about $7 million from the prior year. That's primarily due to the fact that in fiscal 20, we received about $5 million from the State Employer Incentive Fund when we created a new pension site account. That was a one-time transaction, so that wasn't repeated in fiscal 2021. So the net result of all of these items was a fiscal 21 net income of $3.6 million in the general fund. It's worth noting, this is an accounting accrual-based number, which reflects some non-cash expenses, environmental accruals, depreciation, things like that. But it's encouraging to see a positive bottom line in the general fund in the midst of a pandemic. Next, please. So here we had high-level balance sheet information for the general fund. Again, you can see total assets and total liabilities. This time they both decreased during the year. But the total liability decreased by about $8 million more than total assets. And that results in an increase to the general fund's net position. That $8.1 million increase can really be attributed to the modest net income that we just saw, the capital grants we received during the year in the general fund, as well as some transfers from PDX that fund general aviation capital. Next. And so here we add the unrestricted cash and investments for the general fund, and you can see the balance went up about $15 million versus fiscal year 2020. This is really the result of positive cash flows from operations. We had more cash received from customers and other sources than we sent out the door to suppliers and paid out in wages. So it's a good result for the year. Next slide. So now we'll take a quick look at our report on federal awards. This slide just recaps some of the information in the report regarding our expenditures of federal awards. You can see on that first line that our total expenditures of federal awards increased pretty significantly year over year. And then the 3 lines under the heading details of larger federal awards, that shows the primary areas where the port received federal funding and how much was received under each program. The FAA Airport Improvement Program that funds airport capital improvements. And we incurred less grant eligible spending in fiscal 21 than in the prior year. The year over year fluctuations here are largely a function of what projects we're undertaking in a given year and whether or not they're eligible for federal funding. The next line, CARES and CARISA Act funding. The port was awarded $72.5 million under the CARES Act, and then another $18.9 million under the CARISA Act. And so we drew $63.8 million of that funding during fiscal 21. Nearly all of that was for PDX. On the Army Corps of Engineers dredging line, that is our reimbursable contract for maintenance dredging of the river channel. So it's not a grant, but it's technically considered a federal award for purposes of this report. And the level of maintenance dredging that we perform is really dictated by the Corps, and it depends in large part on the level of funding they receive. So not much of a change year over year there. All right, next slide. So the last report we've given you is the report on passenger facility charges. We typically refer to those as PFCs, and the PFC is that $4.50 per ticket charge that's assessed on in-plane passengers. It's collected by the airlines, and then it's remitted to the airport to be spent on FAA-approved projects. So the PFC report starts with the same information that's contained in the other two financial reports, but then starting on about page 46 of the report, there's information specific to the PFC program, as well as Moss Adams' report on compliance and internal control over compliance related to the FAA's PFC program. So in this table, you can see that PDX collected about 20 million less in PFCs in fiscal 21 than in fiscal 20, driven as a result of those lower employments we talked about during fiscal 21. We earned a little less interest on our PFC balances in fiscal 20, or in fiscal 21 versus fiscal 20, as a result of lower cash balances and lower interest rates. And you can see that our spending was lower in fiscal 21 versus fiscal 20. Because in fiscal 20, we had significant PFC expenditures on the Concourse E extension and the apron redevelopment that we just didn't have in fiscal 21. And you may notice that in fiscal 21, our PFC expenditures actually exceeded our collections. That is unusual, but I will point out that we still have an accumulated balance of PFCs out there on our balance sheet that we hold for PFC expenditures that are approved by the FAA. And that gives us some breathing room while employments and PFC collections recover from the pandemic. All right, so we'll go to the next slide. That concludes my review of the audit reports. So before I hand things over to Moss Adams, I will take a breath and pause a moment and ask if there are any questions. So hearing none, Moss Adams is the port's, Commissioner Sampa.
Commissioner Sampa.
Yeah, in addition to the financial reports, were there any findings, maybe around controls, that were done that, as commissioners, we need to be aware of?
Yeah, I don't want to steal Moss Adams' thunder, but I'm going to say, fortunately, no, there were not. But yeah, Moss Adams is going to give you their required communications and talk about their findings or lack thereof, areas where they've focused their work. So they'll give you some of that information in just a moment.
Okay, thank you.
So as you probably recall, Moss Adams is our independent auditor. They conduct our required annual audit of our financial records. I'm pleased to say that they continue to do an excellent job, both being able to coordinate their audits remotely and efficiently, which has been an impressive and pleasant surprise in this pandemic environment. So with us here today, we have Ashley Austin and Rachel Tarver. Ashley's the engagement partner. Rachel's the senior manager. And so I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Good morning, commissioners. And we're just really excited to be here today to talk to you a little bit about our results. So if you want to go ahead to go to the next slide. So just a little agenda to guide our conversation today, but of course, feel free to interrupt me at any time. We'll go through our auditor opinions and reports, talk about the areas that we emphasized as part of our audit, spent a little bit more time on, The main reason that we get together today is to really go through our required communications with those charged with governance, which is this group, and then just some very limited other information. Next slide, please. And you can go to the next slide. So we did issue an unmodified opinion on your financial statements that says that your financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. The highest level of assurance that you can receive, also known as a clean opinion, that's exactly what you want to hear. So you can go to the next slide. We also issue a report related to Oregon Municipal Auditing Standards, or the Oregon Minimum Standards, which the port must comply with as part of being an Oregon Municipal Corporation. We do issue a report on compliance and on internal control. No compliance findings, no control findings, although I will mention that there were 2 minor budgetary over expenditures that were disclosed in the report, but were not listed here on this slide, but very minor. And as usual, the port sometimes experiences a few accruals at the end of the year that they are not able to go back and update their budget for. So it's not unexpected that occurs, but when it does happen, they are required to be disclosed in the report. Next slide, please. As Bob mentioned, we also perform a single audit resulting from the fact that the port receives and spends more than $750,000 of federal awards. So the first report that you see listed there is just our report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance, and that's in accordance with our government auditing standards. No financial reporting findings, no compliance findings, so very clean opinion there. That's what you want to hear. And then in terms of just the actual major programs or where we focus our audit in terms of the single audit, so we focused on both the airport improvement program because you received so many federal awards that flowed through that program in relation to the CARES Act and CRISA Act. And then also the Corps of Engineers dredging contract. That kind of cycles through usually every 3 years. So we audited that during 2021 as well. And that is really looking at the kind of the nitty gritty of the contracts, right? So any compliance requirements that you're required to comply with, we're testing all of those specific compliance requirements, and the materiality levels are really low there. So usually if there's anything that's different by more than 50 cents, we have to ask about it. It's very compliance driven. So to have no deficiencies identified and no compliance findings reported in that report, a clean opinion is actually very good kudos to management. So next slide, please. And then finally, on the passenger facility charges, again, that first report is just in relation to government auditing standards, internal control over financial reporting. Again, no financial reporting findings, no compliance findings. And then we also do a report on compliance similar to that for the single audit, but just in accordance with the passenger facility charge program. No internal control findings and no compliance findings. So overall, a very clean year. If you want to go to the next slide, I think I will hand it over to Rachel to kind of just give you an overview of where we focused our time.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ashley. You can go ahead and jump to the next slide. So as Ashley mentioned, we will provide you with some details over areas where we really focused our time. With regards to internal controls, we evaluated the design and implementation for key controls of the port over various cycles, which are included here. And certain areas we do test the operating effectiveness of these controls. We focused on estimates included in the financial statements, with the most significant being that environmental remediation liability. We obtained representations from general counsel and outside legal counsel, and we apply various audit procedures over the reasonableness of any additional estimates. We evaluated the completeness of the pension liability and rely on actuarial analysis performed by third-party specialists. We verified the issuance of the Series 27 bonds were accounted for accurately, and we reviewed the discounts, premiums, and all activity related to the bonds during the fiscal year. We performed capital asset testing in the current year over the additions to the airport. So we all know there was a number of them. They look beautiful. We also looked at retirements and depreciation. We spent time over revenue recognition using financial and non-financial metrics to analyze operating revenue of the port, and we confirm with third parties a number of the revenue streams, including property tax revenue, investment income, both the PFC and CFC revenue, and federal grants. And then lastly, we do evaluate the collectability of any receivables that are at year end. In evaluating that position, we consider classification, most importantly with the classification between unrestricted, restricted, and net investment and capital assets. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. Our IT team evaluates change management, security, and access of the information systems used by the port. And this year in the single audit, as Ashley mentioned, there were 2 major programs that we tested, and there were no instances of non-compliance as a result of our procedures. We are required to perform an unpredictable procedure each year, and with the remote work environment in place for the duration of the fiscal year, we focused on the processes and controls of the port and the changes made in the remote environment. Throughout our audit procedures, we do rely on the internal audit department of the port to perform substantive testing at our direction and really consider them to be members of our engagement team. To give them a quick shout out, we very much appreciate the collaborative relationship that we have with everyone in that department. So I think Ashley's going to take us through to the next slide with communications that we're required to provide to you.
Thanks, Rachel. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. This will be the bulk of our conversation today. Again, those required communications with those charged with governance. So our responsibility under U.S. generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards is just to express our opinion. You know, management is really good about preparing those financial statements very well and providing those to us. But the only thing that we own in all 3 of those packets that Bob mentioned is just that opinion. So we are responsible for expressing that opinion. Our audit doesn't relieve you or management of your responsibilities. We do perform our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards, and we design that audit to obtain reasonable, not absolute assurance. So we don't audit every single dollar or every single transaction. We do consider internal control over financial reporting and internal control over compliance as a basis really for designing those audit procedures and determining whether we can rely on those controls, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on those controls or the effectiveness of them. And then finally, we communicate findings that in our judgment are relevant to your responsibilities in overseeing the financial reporting process, but we're not required to design procedures for the purpose of identifying other matters to communicate to you. Next slide, please. So we met with the commission officers at our audit entrance meeting back in June. This would be our opportunity to let you know if we had any change to the plan, scope, and timing of the audit. I'm pleased to report that there were no changes. We conducted our audit, as Bob mentioned, remotely, and it went smoothly from our end. So no changes to the plan, scope, or timing of the audit this year. Next slide. So as you know, management has the responsibility to select and use appropriate accounting policies, but as part of our audit, we do spend quite a bit of time determining whether those accounting policies have been reasonably selected and used throughout the year. We review any changes that happened during the year, and this year the port did adopt 2 standards, accounting standards, Gasb87 and Gasb90 around fiduciary activities and majority equity interests, but I will tell you that neither one of them resulted in any significant changes to the financial statements. We do review the impact of those adoptions, but as I mentioned, we noted the disclosures were appropriate there. No other changes to significant accounting policies happened during the fiscal year ended June 30. And then as a result of all of our procedures, including reviewing those financial statements in detail, we believe that management has selected and applied those significant accounting policies appropriately and consistently with that of the prior year. Next slide, please. So as you know, the financial statements do include pretty significant management judgments and accounting estimates, and we do spend a lot of time determining if those estimates are reasonable, that they're unbiased, that they're consistent for the most part with the prior year. The most significant ones that we spend time with are that environmental remediation liability, any sort of legal contingencies, and then also depreciation. As Bob mentioned in his opening remarks, depreciation was a huge number this year, continues to be. We do evaluate all of those estimates with a little bit more rigor than we would other items in your financial statements, just because those are subject to management bias. And based on all of our procedures, we deemed all of those management estimates reasonable and appropriate. I'm going to hand it back over to Rachel to take it all the way to the end, almost to the end.
Thank you. We can keep going to the next slide. So we recognize there is a lot of information in the port's financial statements, but we'd like to really focus your attention to the following 4 notes, which are considered to be significant to the users of the financial statements. Each of these generally align back to those areas of audit emphasis that I went through a little bit earlier. Moving forward. We are pleased to say that there were no difficulties encountered during our audit. Continuing on, we did not identify any adjusting journal entries as a result of our audit procedures. Consistent with previous years, we did have one past adjusting entry related to land held for sale, and we agree with management's decision to pass on posting the entry as it is due to a difference in methodologies and overall a timing difference of that recognition. Continuing forward. As noted, all of our potential legal proceedings and claims are appropriately disclosed in the financial statements and were identified and included. And continuing on, there were also no disagreements with management that we felt we need to bring up. And continuing forward, this gets back to one of the comments before we started our presentation, but to bring it full circle, as a result of those audit procedures, we did not identify any material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or instances of non-compliance. If any of those things were identified, we would be required to communicate them to you here. Moving forward. We are not aware of the port consulting with other accountants. If we heard about this, or if there is, sometimes I think it's called opinion shopping in different areas, we would be required to communicate that with you. But again, we were not aware of any of those instances occurring during our audit procedures. And then other than the contract, the AUP engagement letters and the management representation letters for the financial statements and the PFC audit, there have been no other significant communications that we would be required to communicate with you. And then there are no matters that came to our attention during our audit procedures as it relates to the port's ability to continue as a going concern. And then we're pleased to say that we are not aware of any instances of fraud or non-compliance with laws or regulations. And Ashley's going to close us out.
Ashley, you're on mute.
Muted.
I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. It always happens once every virtual meeting, right? It means I'm human. Okay, I wanted to just highlight a couple of things that Rachel mentioned before we dive into this accounting update, which will be very brief. The first is that there were no adjusting journal entries. So an adjusting journal entry would be one that we identify as auditors that would need to be posted in order to receive that clean opinion. Obviously, you did receive a clean opinion, but that also tells you that the trial balance that we received from management, we didn't have to make any adjustments to it. So very, very clean. I think I also just wanted to call out no disagreements with any types of auditing or accounting matters. That's usual, and we haven't ever disagreed with management, but no disagreements there. And then finally, no significant deficiencies, no material weaknesses. Just really want to give some high-level kudos to management for a very clean year this year. So if we go on to the accounting update, Gasb, again, just never sleeps. I'm pretty sure there are some significant standards that are going to be coming down the pipe here for the port that are effective for the port's fiscal year 2022. The most significant one there is that first one that's listed, Gasb87 Leases. We've been talking to management about this for some time now, and I think that they have made great strides and great progress, and it will be effective for, again, this fiscal year that we're in now. And we will be spending some time with that hopefully soon, early on in calendar year 2022 to get comfortable with those leases. In terms of the other ones that are on there that are significant, none are significant to the port's operation. I would just call out Gasb97. You do have a Section 457 deferred comp plan that will need to be evaluated. And then Gasb98, they changed the name of the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report to the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, which will need to be updated in all the various items that where Comprehensive Annual Financial Report used to be listed. It doesn't really matter for the port because that you don't issue an annual comprehensive financial report, but just wanted to mention that. And then if you want to go to the next slide, I think that just lists our contact information. So if you had any other questions or concerns, you could feel free to reach out to us at any time, but I will open it up for questions.
No question, just want to express gratitude for all the work I know goes into an audit. So gratitude to both the team inside the port as well as the external audit team for doing this work, given current conditions and a complicated institution. So thank you for that. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Sampat.
Yeah, I guess this is a question for Antoinette or Curtis rather than the audit report. As we go into the next year and the CARES CRISA numbers go down, and we don't know what the impact of any of the new infrastructure bill will be. What's the outlook in terms of loss or profitability? And since a big portion of us doing well was as a result of those funds coming in.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I'll take it and then maybe lean on Antoinette here as well. We are putting our plan together, and of course we'll bring that to you. But I think the short answer is we're optimistic that we're coming back. Our numbers have essentially plateaued, and much of that we expect from the winter, essentially. So I'd say we're on track for a recovery, and we're putting those numbers together now. So Antoinette, do you want to just note where we are in terms of budget?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And Commissioner, thank you for the question. Very much appreciated. So when we came into this budget season for fiscal year 22, we had projected, as we're coming back through the recovery, that employments would be somewhere between 30 and 35% down, and budgeted accordingly. As of the first quarter, we're pretty much tracking there in terms of employments, and then the cascading of revenue that is generated from that activity. And so we're right in line at about 33%. And when we look at our long-term forecast coming through this recovery, we continue to be tracking coming out of the recovery in fiscal year 24 and 25. And so what that means is two things. One, as we have been very conservative in our application of the CRISA and the CARES, CRISA and the ARPA monies, we took the approach that we would bifurcate the application of some of those dollars over the fiscal year 22 and 23 period, so that as we see ourselves getting back to pretty close to pre-2019 or 2019 pre-COVID levels, that that will absorb some of the revenue loss that we experienced at the onset of COVID. And so we feel like, again, we have taken that conservative approach. Again, applying some of those monies over a 2-year period instead of expensing in this current fiscal period, just to protect us and mitigate in the event that we maybe have some pullback in the market. So we are tracking.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the detailed answer, and also kind of for the financially prudent approach to kind of weather the bumps that may come our way.
Yeah, I might also add, not to belabor the discussion, but I think this is important. The port has really been very vigilant in expense controls. And so we have been, pretty consistent coming through at the onset of COVID and the impact that has had. And again, as Bob kind of referenced from the liquidity standpoint, you can see that our liquidity position has actually improved. And again, that part of that driver has to do with the fact that we have been very conscientious around expense controls.
Thank you.
Commissioner Strader?
Yeah, I don't know if you have this information, but how are we tracking comparatively with other municipalities and other airports?
We do have some of that, and maybe Antoinette, you can, if I miss any bit here, I mean, very broadly, I'd say we're in the range of most airports. The hubs, big hubs, came back quicker than the outlier spokes, and we're more like a spoke than we are like a hub. You know, we're, as you know, an origination destination airport. So the hubs are probably 5 or 10% closer to their 100% pre-pandemic numbers. And on ports more broadly, you know, that is really catch as catch can. Some of them are really struggling, although that is less to do with total volumes, because for the most part, volumes are up across the board. And, you know, it's kind of, it depends on the financial situation. My predecessor, Bill, used to say, you've seen one port, you've seen one port, right? That they are really different in the way, and you know this, Commissioner Strader, very well. What we're seeing on the West Coast is mostly folks, their volumes have been overall similar to pre-pandemic levels or even higher depending on the cargo. But as you know, the supply constraints and the trucking shortages and chassis and so on have put some pressure on the rate of that recovery. But you know, we're kind of in the zone, I'd say. Yeah, Antoinette, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it exactly, Curtis, and just the fact that we are an origin and destination airport coming through the recovery, that actually provided a little bit of protection in a very difficult market, because we weren't hit as severely with some of our West Coast counterparts in terms of the international activity, like a SFO or like a LAX. So we have come back, and because we're origin and destination, and because the leisure market has really come back more robustly, I would say, relative to some of the business traveler, which we're seeing some continued improvement on the business side as well, that actually put us right, as Curtis referenced, in the middle of the pack in terms of percentage of recovery and the trajectory and the time.
Thank you.
If I could just add, Madam President, just quickly in answer to both these questions, and I know we're in the audit conversation here, but maybe a little bit to Ashley's point earlier, the team has done a really good job here, and it helps that not only financially we tightened our belt very quickly, but port employees also took a pay cut for a time, essentially got us through the worst of the year that was the pandemic. And just a shout out to everyone who got together and said, let's go conservative. If we can come back quicker, we'll be in good shape. But if we can't, we're going to survive. And, you know, making some early decisions quickly on how we could save money and this great federal response was really important. And it has enabled us, honestly, to be looking now at the other side of this rather than be stuck in, you know, how are we going to pull ourselves out?
Thank you, Curtis. Commissioner McDonald.
First, I'd like to say congratulations, Antoinette, on the very clean audit results. And thank you for your guidance, as well as the rest of the port employees. That was a very important shout out by our executive director. I know it's been a team effort all in to get us through. As you look forward, Antoinette, what are the strengths that you see that you're going to be relying upon as we go through this longer, more drawn out pandemic situation? You still have fairly fresh eyes on the Port of Portland, so I would be interested in hearing your perspective on our strengths in terms of getting us through? What do you see we have going for us? And what do we need to be watchful for? And what would you ask from the commission?
Okay, great. No, thank you. Thank you for that question. I would say try to keep this as succinct as possible. I think there are two things that speak to the first part of that in terms of our strengths. And one is, actually, they're going to be three. The strength of our management team and our ability to make decisions, and I think prudently, quickly, but thoughtfully, looking at the long-term sustainability of our organization. I would say the next thing is, because of the decisions that the solid, really good decisions that management has continued to make, has put us in a strong liquidity position. Important, particularly as we're in the middle of one of the biggest capital projects. And so our ability to still have an opportunity to access the capital markets is really very important, particularly over these next couple of years. And so I think the last piece is just, again, it speaks to management, but I think just the agility of the entire organization, understanding that, we're all in this together and sitting down in a very collaborative way, again, making sometimes those tough decisions, but knowing that it's the right thing for the organization and it will accrue beneficially long term. So those are some of the things that I see. Watchful, probably more external. It's just the continued uncertainty around the markets. And again, I just mentioned going out and having access to the capital markets is really important to us to complete our capital program over the next couple of 3 years. Any disruption to those capital markets, just giving everything that's happening in the market, would be challenging. But the port is well positioned to still be able to put ourselves in the best position. So we're just weathering through it. And I just think I would close with, we have the right team. We have the right resources. We have the right understanding of how to leverage those to continue to be, to put the port in a really strong position. What I need from the commission, what our team may need from the commission, is just your continued support and vigilance and asking these types of questions, continuing to ask the critical and tough questions to challenge us to think more strategically and more broadly. Not that we don't already do that, but certainly just to continue to keep us sharp in that regard. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further question or discussions on the audit or the financial position of the port? Okay, seeing none, I want to thank everybody and I will adjourn the meeting. We'll see you. I'm sorry, we have Commissioner Strader. Sorry.
No problem. I wanted to congratulate you guys basically on your team as a whole and the port employees on how nimble and how proactive you've been in light of the situation we've had. This something like COVID, so unforeseen, yet so disruptive. But you guys have done a wonderful job of being very quick to be able to turn the ship around. It's a big institution. It's not always easy to do. It takes some willpower and some fortitude, some insight. I think you guys have done a wonderful job. Anyway, just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. As noted, boy, I've been super impressed with our team, and it's the financial team, but it's the folks on the ground showing up every day. And we've talked about it before. I do appreciate the shout out and pass that along to our team. It's been extraordinary, and I'm really proud of the reaction of everyone along the line, including everyone putting their own skin in the game, saying, look, we're going to get through this together. And I'm just really proud of the organization. So thank you. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. I'll say here, and thank you, Commissioner Strader. It's a great moment to end the meeting. Certainly an important comment to make given the difficulty of the last couple of years.
Madam President, I don't know, do we need a vote to accept the audit report, or I guess I'm looking to Dan or?
I'll take council's advice on that.
No, unless Ashley needs that. I don't think there's an agenda item for that. It's just sharing the results.
Lovely.
Well, thank you very much. Now I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all and see you next month.
Bye. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Everybody. Everyone go have a beer.